This is $12,000 of brand new tools that I'm going to be putting head to head to find out which brand makes the best tool. So around me are 6 different brands, 6 different combo kits, and what I did is I went out and bought a combo kit from each of these brands around that $2,000 mark. So this way we're comparing what tools we get for the same price tag, and most of these are 18 volt, apart from Hikoki's, which is actually a 36 volt range of tools. The first tools that we're going to test are the impact drivers. Now with the impact drivers, I'm going to repeat a test that I have done in the past, and what I'm going to do is insert the screw the entire way, and as soon as it's all the way in, the head is beyond flush with the timber, I'm going to pull it out, get a new screw, and do the same process. To keep this test fair, I'll be using new screws for every single impact driver, and we'll be screwing into fresh bits of timber. I've got a few off-cut blocks, I've shot them together. I've gone through and I've set all these impact drivers to the max setting. Besides the Bosch, this is the only impact driver where we don't have settings where we can change gears. It's just got the 1 speed. All right, we're going to start this test off with Dewalt. Next up, we've got Makita. Alright, out of the 18 volt tools, I've probably got the highest hopes for Milwaukee's one. Although I don't love Milwaukee's saw, I can say they make a good drill and driver. This feels nice. It sounds like it's got power. Let's see how it goes. Definitely was great. I think what I'm going to have to do is cut out the time it takes me to stop and start each screw. We're using the exact same bugle screw bit. These are all Irwin bits I've just picked up. So obviously if I've got an issue trying to get a screw onto the bit, it could be a deformation with the screw, it could be something with the bit. I need to stop grabbing that, I'm burning myself as well. So we'll cut out that time and we'll just use the time from when the impactor starts pushing the screw down and pulling the screw out. Without seeing the time, pretty sure this is a winner so far. And with that being said, I want to put it head to head with the AEG. From the testing I've done, AEG and Milwaukee have been neck and neck with the impactors and the drills. Made by the same company. This thing feels good, sounds good as well. Let's see how it goes. So last for the 18 volt tools, we've got the Bosch impact driver, which also doubles up as an impact wrench. At the end of the tool, we've got a bugle bit in it, obviously, and it's also got the square head for you to put sockets on. So that's definitely a benefit for it. A negative is obviously we don't have any gears that we can control. It's just got the 1 speed. Let's see how quick that speed is though. Last thing we want to do though is try out the 36 volt, and I'm really curious to see how this goes because I've done a test before using Milwaukee and AEG's 18 volt tools, and they were actually quicker than Makita's 40 volt impact driver. So let's see how Hikoki's 36 volt impact driver goes. Honestly, I do absolutely love the look, and I do love the hold of this impact driver. Your little tabs to switch it from reverse are massive. I don't know if you can see how far that really sticks out from the side of the tool, but normally while you're going, it's easy to get your thumb on and just switch it over to reverse. I think every time my thumb kind of got stuck and I had to go out wider than any other tool. That is really annoying. I don't love that switch. For the test though, it did feel quite powerful, but it did feel very similar to Milwaukee and AEG's. All right, so here's a look at the scoreboard after that first test. Milwaukee did get the 6 points, but it was pretty close with AEG and Hikoki right behind it. And next up, we're going to be testing the drills. So for this test, I've set up 2 off-cut bits of LVL on this bench, and each drill is going to get a brand new spade bit, and we're going to test how long it takes for that drill to do 3 holes through this LVL. For a bit of fun, I'm actually going to reposition these drills in the order on which I think they're going to rank. And this idea is just going off how they feel when I squeeze the trigger. I think Hikoki's 36 volt is going to be the best, followed by AEG, Milwaukee. You can see the rest. But what I'm going to do is start with Dewalt's drill, and I'm hoping if I'm right that every single test, the drill is going to beat the one before it. Let's see how good my guess is. Look, that wasn't too bad, but I am hoping that this was on the slower side. I'm hoping these other drills can really beat that time. It's a bit too hard to gauge as well, but I'm gonna make sure with all these drills, I'm just using the one hand, and I'm gonna be as consistent as I can be with the amount of pressure I push down on them. All right, Bosch is up. I'm gonna cut that. Look, I was under the impression that I went through and tightened these really well. I'm gonna leave that open thinking that that may be user error. I'm gonna disregard that hole. We'll do 3 new holes with the Bosch. And if that happens again, I've gone through and properly tightened this bit. If that happens again, I think we're gonna put that down as a problem with Bosch's chuck. Alright, that was a lot better. She did honestly feel very similar to Dewalt's drill, and I'm going to put down that bit falling out as my issue. I went through, made sure it was properly tight for the next 3 holes, and it stayed in for those 3 holes. Next up is Makita. Alright, that was definitely the best by far, so far that is. That felt really clean and really easy to drill those holes. From my previous experience with Milwaukee, I think this drill is going to beat that Makita. I think this is going to be a step up once again. Wow, that actually blew me away. I thought it'd be better. That smoked the Makita once again. It felt like it did at least anyway. I'm not going to be able to find out the times until I edit this, so we'll have a really true representation then. Truthfully, I actually wasn't sure if there'd be a big difference between this test here. I thought using the same spade bits we might have similar results, but I definitely noticed a huge difference so far from that Dewalt and Bosch to the Milwaukee already. With how good the Milwaukee was, I'm a bit worried I may have screwed up the order. We still got the Hikoki and AEG, which I expect to be better than Milwaukee. We'll see how true that is. Obviously, we still got the wild card to go. Let's see how good Hikoki's drill is. you're a Milwaukee fan, you'll be loving this so far. Another 6 points for the Milwaukee, so they're getting a good lead early on in the test. Once again though, Hikoki and AEG did come in second and third place, so they are right behind Milwaukee. I think this test is going to be the most important test that we do. We're going to be testing which battery lasts the longest. Now the way we're going to be testing these batteries is by fully charging one of them, putting them in a saw, and we're just going to do max cuts until the battery dies. There we go. I'm glad that's over. I'm pretty sure I've said this before, but there's actually not a single thing I like about this Milwaukee saw. It's heavy, it's clunky, the guard gets stuck on every single cut I try to start. I hate the triggers and how awkward it is for the safety trigger there. But regardless, we got through it and the battery is dead. All right, next up, we're gonna test Bosch. That feels so much lighter and easier to use than the Milwaukee. The only thing bad against the Bosch is the visibility, the line of sight, trying to see through into the backside of the blade there is near impossible. That's her. Yep, that's definitely dead. Now doing that test with the Bosch saw was so much easier than the Milwaukee. Using the saw for about 20 minutes and doing heaps of cuts gives me a really good feel on how the saw's built, how easy it is to use, how heavy it is, obviously how the guard goes back. So I think on top of this battery test that we're doing right now, at the end of this test, I'm also going to rank the saws and just the user friendliness and just how easy it is to actually use a saw. And we'll add that to the ranking as well. All right, next up, we'll test Makita. The guard on the Makita saw started to annoy me, so I did jam some timber in there. And in terms of ranking these saws as I go, Makita so far is in between Milwaukee and Bosch. All right, next up, AEG. All right, that's the AEG saw done. And in terms of the rank, I think Bosch is still the best saw, and AEG is going to be a close second sitting behind it. All right, for the Hikoki and Dewalt saw, these are both 185mm blades. But to make this test more fair, I'm going to adjust the depth so the same depth of the blade is going through the timber. And that should make this test more even. If we have the full depth of these blades going through the timber, that means there'll be more of the blade touching the timber at all times, meaning more resistance, and that means it will drain through more of its charge per cut. All right, so I've set that blade. Now it's time to test the Dewalt. She's dead. Look, this saw was pretty nice to use, apart from the fact that it was really heavy. One key feature I really noticed about it was that the guard came up so seamlessly every single cut, even if I was holding it with my right hand or my left hand. Because of the weight though, it's going towards the back, but it's still better than Milwaukee's. All right, the last that we have, well, the last battery we have is Hikoki. And this one's gonna be very interesting. Like all the tests we've done, this one is a wild card, but even more so for this test here. This is Hikoki's 18 volt 5 amp battery when it's used for an 18 volt tool. This saw is 36 volt, and when this battery is used for a 36 volt tool, it's only 2.5 amp hours. Now, I do think Hikoki will come last in the test because it is essentially a 2.5 amp hour battery. But one advantage it should have, being a 36 volt saw, is that it should cut through the timber a lot easier than all the other saws. So in theory, that means it won't have to be spinning the blade for as long for every single cut, which means it could potentially do okay in this test. I still don't think it's going to beat any of these saws here, but I'm interested to see what it does. Oh, that's it. That saw actually felt pretty good to use, and it lasted a lot longer than what I was expecting. Apart from its weight, which is something you'd expect with a 36 volt tool, I didn't mind how it felt to move around and use it. It's still gonna go towards the end. I'm not gonna lie, I think it's gonna be second last. It didn't feel too bad. Obviously these smaller saws were so light, so easy to use. Dewalt saw, apart from its weight, this thing just glided through the timber. And I think it did, well, it definitely did beat Milwaukee. Things are starting to change up a little bit now. So AEG got the 6 points, pushing them in front of Milwaukee, who only scored 1 point on that test. It is going to get worse for Milwaukee though, because we are also comparing the saw builds here, and Milwaukee got another 1 point. That's 2 1 points in a row, which now makes Milwaukee equal second with both Hikoki and Makita. Makita had a few good rounds there, catching up with Hikoki and Milwaukee, and AEG is starting to get a bit of a gap in first place now. Alright, we're going to do another test to test the endurance of these batteries. That first test honestly shocked me, especially from the difference between AEG and Milwaukee. The same company makes both of those tools, and I was expecting the technology in the batteries to be very similar, and for them to rank first and last has actually blown my mind. So we're going to be testing the batteries now in a different tool and see if that makes a difference. Now this test is going to be very similar to that first impact test we did, and I'm just going to be driving a bugle screw in and out of timber, but this time we're not doing it for speed. We're going to be putting that screw in and out as many times as possible before the battery dies. I don't care which tool does it the quickest, we're looking at which tool can do the most amount of screws before the battery dies. Alright, so we're going to start with the wild card. We'll start off with a Hikoki for this test, and I'm just going to be screwing a 150mm bugle screw down through the side of this 240 pine beam here. Oh, she's back on there, but I don't know, that's probably worth to note that she did overheat after 42 screws, and she has overheated. But we do have 3 out of 4 bars left in the battery though. So what we might do for this test, we want to make it suit our real life application as much as possible. So I might wait about 30 seconds and then we'll keep going. Because if you are using these tools and you're on a roof and you're doing something and you need to continuously be screwing, if the battery overheats and it takes a while to get going again, it's essentially as good as being flat. 50 screws, and that is completely gone through one side of this beam. So I've only got 6 of these off-cut bits of timber, all at the same size. So what we're going to be doing for every single impact is go through and do 50 screws on the top face. And once we've all done the same amount of screws on one side, then we'll flip it and keep going on the other side. Because obviously the screw goes more than halfway through the timber, so this side could potentially be a lot easier as that timber's already broken up. So we'll make sure it's fair and do the same amount of screws on the same side before swapping over. All Alright, that one's definitely dead and not overheated. I could feel it on the last few screws. That really started to slow down. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't expecting it to be able to do so many. I started to panic on the backside and we started doing all the screws next to each other. This may be interesting, but we'll go with the Milwaukee next and see if it can redeem itself from the last test. For all these tests, we'll be using new timber and new screws as well. Oh, that's 50. Yeah, she's definitely dead. That is really disappointing with the Milwaukee. And just to double check that it wasn't a battery's fault, I did use a different battery to what we used for the saw test. Now what's so surprising about this test so far is just the difference between the Hikoki and the Milwaukee. Obviously in the previous battery test, Hikoki and Dewalt came equal second last, just before Milwaukee. It's going to be really interesting to see where this places because there's such a big difference between Hikoki and Milwaukee already. Right, that's 50, and she's on the 1 bar. Honestly, at the moment, it looks like no tool may come close to Hikoki. Alright, so the Dewalt has bet Milwaukee once again. Yep, she's done. She's actually smoking from the motor. Can you see that? So one bad thing about Dewalt is it doesn't seem like it's got an automatic shut-off feature when the motor starts getting too hot. If I have my hand here hovering above the motor, it is warm. I accidentally knocked it before, and this impactor is so hot. Hikoki Milwaukee didn't get anywhere near as hot as this. Keep in mind though, you're probably never going to be doing what I'm doing for 20 minutes straight, just absolutely abusing the tools to get everything out of them. Alright, next up is Bosch. Didn't do as good as its previous test. It's still bet Milwaukee, but Dewalt and Hikoki still had this one covered. Alright, next up we got Makita. This came second last time, so let's see how it goes and if it can give Hikoki a run. That's 50 screws done and she's on her last bar. No way. Oh, you're kidding. So the Makita's died with 62 screws, meaning that it's last place so far. Milwaukee has bet the Makita, which is a huge turnaround from what we got from the saw test. We've got the last impact driver. Let's see how AG goes. This thing feels insanely fast after using Makita. Alright, it's 50. And she's down to 2 bars. All the other brands progressively died out. We could feel the battery dying. AEG just stopped like that. So we're going to do the same thing we did with Hikoki when it just abruptly stopped and presume it may be because of overheating. So I'll give it 30 seconds, we'll try again. If nothing happens, she's done. AG is on the 1 bar though. Yep, she's definitely dead. All right, so we've got a very different ranking this time compared to the last test. Hikoki smoked the competition, but what probably is important to note is we were using long 150mm bugle screws, and that's where the more powerful tool would probably win. If I was to redo this test and we're using smaller screws, maybe 50 or 75mm bugle screws, it means the 18-volt tools won't struggle as much to drive those screws in, and they could potentially last longer. So that test pushed both Bosch and Hikoki up a place. Hikoki is now in second all by itself, and Bosch is now tied Milwaukee for 3rd place. And we can both see that Makita and Dewalt are both tied in last place as well. All right, so I've got one more test that I want to do on the battery's endurance. So far we've done the saw cuts, and that was running the battery under a moderate load. The screws that we just did was testing the battery under a high load. And now what we're going to be doing is turning all of these blowers on at the same time and running the batteries under a low load and see which one lasts longest. I'm going to put all these batteries in at the exact same time, turn them all on, and it's the last blower standing which wins. So I've chucked some paper on the end of all these nozzles so we can see when the blowers turn off as well. All right, I'm going to try to do my best to start them all as quick as I can. Let's do it. We'll keep these blowers running, and while I wait for them to die, we might jump on and start testing these saws. Now I want to do a few tests with these saws, but the first one is going to be a speed test. I've got a few offcuts of 9045 pine, and I'm going to be timing these saws to see how quick I can use them to do 10 cuts through this 9045 pine. So obviously the main thing we're looking at are these 18-volt saws. These 4 are brand new. Bosch, Dewalt and Milwaukee, I haven't even spun the blade once. I've got no idea how these saws feel. The AG saw, I've been using it for a day or two, so the blades are rubbed off a little bit, but it's still as good as new. It's still sharp. I don't think that's going to impact the test whatsoever. With the Makita kit, the only tool we didn't get was a circular saw. So this one's a co-worker's, it's a few months old, but it still should be up for the test. All right, so first up, we're gonna start with Milwaukee's. Truthfully, that saw did feel a bit awkward to me. I kept getting the guard caught on the timber. We're going to jump in with the AEG saw next. We've got Makita's saw. This is the only test and the only tool where we're going to be using a slightly older used model, but let's see how it compares anyway. Now obviously already one of the biggest things in this test is how quick can I move the saw back, move it over, and get the cut started without hitting the guard. From initial feel, with the AEG saw is actually my favorite one so far. But from that test, out of the Milwaukee AEG and Makita so far, I found Makita's saw the easiest one to move across and get that guard up to start the next cut. So obviously this test is looking at more than just the power of the saw. It's looking at how easy it is to move the saw around and get your cut started. All right, we got Dewalt's. That's a huge plus already for Dewalt saw. As you can see in those cuts, the sawdust is actually flying out sideways and it's not covering me. All right, next up is Bosch's saw. I'm actually really curious to see how this goes. I've got no idea what to think of Bosch's tools yet, so we'll let the test tell us. Probably should have locked that in place first, but I don't think that slowed us down. And obviously that's the 18-volt tools done. The last saw we're looking at is the 36-volt saw. I'm really excited to see how this goes. Obviously the 36-volt saws are in this mix, are in the test, because their price range is very similar to the 18-volt saws. And I also think I may have thrown out the Hikoki blade when I was throwing my boxes around, opening up all these tools. So Hikoki's starting to do really well with these tests, which has slightly surprised me. I thought a 36 volt tool at that price would have a catch on it. Maybe there still is something that we will find out. But those 6 points Hikoki scored has put them equal first with AEG, who only scored 2 points in that round. And if you are a Milwaukee fanboy, I know there's a few out there, you're going to be hating this so far, but Milwaukee has dropped down into last place. We do have another test we're doing with the saws though. We're going to be testing these saws in a rip, and let's see if Milwaukee can do better in that test. All right, so the next test I want to do, which may be a bit more fair on testing the power of these saws, is going through and doing a rip on this LVL off cut. All right, so I'm going to start with the AEG saw for this one. So part of the test is obviously trying to see how quick I can move it without the saw actually jamming up and stopping like it did right then. I can feel how quick the saw's going. For the test, I was trying to push it a bit quicker than what I normally would. What I'll do is I'm going to redo this test, and for all the other saws, I'm going to give them one chance as well. If I do jam up in the cut, I'll redo it, go a little bit slower, and use that second time for the actual time. If it jams up a second time, even with me going slower, that second time is going to be the final time that the saw gets. All right, next test, Milwaukee. All right, we're gonna try that one again, a little bit slower. Alright, so we're going to count that second stop in there. I wasn't giving that much pressure at all. I was letting the saw do all the work, and it still did jam up right at the end of that rip. That did feel quite slow. It did feel like it was a bit of pressure. Just measuring, this beam is exactly 925. Just so in case I have time, I might get a brand new blade and retest this saw. All right, so I have run out and I bought a brand new Makita blade so that we can give this saw a proper test. All right, brand new blade. Let's see how much better this goes now. To be honest, I was actually expecting that to be a little bit easier with the brand new blade. But like all the other tests, we're going to do the same thing. We'll give it one chance with the jams. This time I'm going to go a little bit slower. Hopefully the saw doesn't jam, and we're going to take the second time. All right, next up is a Bosch saw. Just double checking that battery is fully charged. I'm giving it no pressure at all. It just won't cut. All right, if I go super slow, which I did at the end, we can get a cut through. Let's give it our second chance. I'm going to go extremely slow. Let's hope this doesn't jam, because that was pretty poor just then. This is a great lightweight small saw. It just does not have the ripping capabilities though. Picking up the Dewalt saw after the Bosch, a lot more weight behind it. Let's see if that transfers into speed. That felt really great. I'm a good fan of this one. And this last rip is super important for Hikoki's sake. A 36 volt saw If this doesn't smash those saws out of the water, it doesn't have a good leg to stand on. Not a lot of people use the 36 volt range. I'm praying for something good now. For Hikoki's sake, I'm praying that this goes well. Without seeing the times there, I think that's a good sign for Hikoki. That felt quick. The brake doesn't seem great on the saw though. Look at any other saw, brake is almost instantaneous. So Hikoki just bet AEG in that test, and that pushes Hikoki into first place, and AEG is 1 point behind in second place. Dewalt's score in the 4 points has also crept up, and it's in third place for the first time in this test. We've left those blowers for a minute, so let's jump back in and see how those blowers are going. Alright, there we go. They have all died. So Makita obviously won that by a mile, but I know the one thing everyone's thinking. Some of these blowers are obviously more powerful than the other ones, and you'd obviously think that the powerful ones will die first. And I looked into it, and these 4 blowers are basically the same, and they've got a blowing capacity of around 2.9 cubic meters a second. Dewalt is actually slightly less than these 3, but they're all roughly the same. And these 2 are actually more powerful. Makita blows an air volume of around 3.2 cubic meters per second, and Hikoki on the max setting is the most powerful blower at 3.5 cubic meters, and this is actually an 18 volt tool for this test. So this test, they're all running off the exact same batteries. Makita lasts the longest, and it's also more powerful than the majority of the blowers here. So Makita does get the 6 points for winning that, but from that gap in the competition, Makita should get more than 6 points there. That was insane how much longer that Makita blower lasted for. That's great news for Makita lovers, bad news if you love your Milwaukee tools, because now Milwaukee has fallen last with a significant gap between Makita, Bosch and Dewalt, who are all tied in that third place. And we can also see with AEG coming in last in that test and Hikoki getting the 5 points, Hikoki has now started to take off in that first place. Next up, we're going to be having a look at these Recipros. For this test, I've cut 6 blocks, all at 450 mil, and what we're going to be doing is doing a rip through that timber for time to see which recip can cut through the timber the quickest. The only catch is I'm also going to shoot 10 nails through this block of timber. So we're not only going to be ripping through the timber, we're going to be hitting 10 nails. Most of these recips did come with their own blades in the kit. I don't actually want to use those though. I've gone and bought some Milwaukee blades. Unfortunately, this is just a 5-pack. So I have bought 2 packs of these blades so that each recip can have a brand new fresh blade, and we're not going to be comparing the difference in the blades. This entire test is going to go down to the performance of these saws. So what I'm going to do is put the nails in the exact same spaces for every single test, because the results could vary. If I had 10 nails all closer together and the recip hits the nails first, gets blunt, and then has to go through more timber, or vice versa, it would be a bit easier if the recip goes through a lot of the timber first and then hits the nails and starts to blunt towards the end. So if I mark where every single nail goes, there should be less variables that can influence this test, and it should be more accurate. I think we'll start off with the smaller recips first. We've got Dewalt and Milwaukee, which just have these small sawzills, the one-hand sawzills. Obviously, I'm going to think these will come in last. Let's give them a shot though, let's see how they go. Not too bad, sliced through the 10 nails, didn't have too much resistance. Let's see how this Dewalt one goes. That felt insanely slow and hard to cut through. Side by side, we can see the Milwaukee is a lot larger than Dewalt's saw, and it did demonstrate that it is more powerful as well doing that test. I was struggling with the Dewalt one before we even hit that first nail. It was struggling through the pine. For the 4 proper size, full size recips, I think this is the order and where they're going to rank. Makita being the slowest, and Hikoki's monster massive recip. This thing better be the quickest, otherwise it is just embarrassing with how big and heavy that is. So I'm expecting good things from that. And I'm just ranking these in this order, just for my general feel and play with the trigger. Let's start with Makita and we'll work our way up. All right, that just dominated both Milwaukee and Dewalt. What I'm doing is I'm holding all the receps straight down, and I'm holding them, and as soon as I feel resistance, that's when I'm starting to maneuver them to try to maximize how the receps cut. All right, here we go. That kind of had a mind of its own. It started curving into the LVL and it's hit the LVL. I'm gonna have to redo this one. It did feel really great. I'm gonna redo it starting from this side and cutting back the other way. And I hope that doesn't vibrate too much. Actually, we'll start from the same point, but I'm just gonna make sure we hit the timber and don't go back into the same cut. You know what, I think I might just get another block ready. And honestly, first impression, a 36 volt tool that's this big, this bulky, this heavy, should be cutting a lot quicker than that. Like imagine having that on your belt, trying to walk up onto a roof, carry that through trusses. The thing is massive. A tool this big, I want it to be crazy powerful. So far we can really see that Hikoki and AEG are the top two brands. They came in first and second once again. Hikoki did snag the first place though, so its lead is extending by even more. And honestly, I think I underestimated Bosch to start with, but I am surprised to see Bosch in third place. The next tool we're gonna jump in and test is gonna be the grinders. For this test, I've gone out and I brought a 20mm threaded rod. And what we're gonna be doing with all of these grinders is trying to do 3 cuts through the rod and see how quick they can get it done. Out of the 18 volt tools, I've actually got no idea which grinder is gonna do best in this test. So I'm just gonna start randomly with the Makita. We'll see how it goes. Alright, so that was a bit slow, and once again that's because I'm putting no pressure onto the cut at all. I'm just letting the weight of the tool and the disc do all the cutting, just to try to make this test as fair as possible. We'll jump on next with Dewalt. That did feel a bit slower than Makita's. Next up, we'll try out Bosch's grinder. hate that switch being right there. I also probably should reiterate, I'm not pushing the grinders down at all, but I am trying to just hold them there so that that blade does have a bit of pressure just to stay in contact with the bar. Obviously some of the lighter grinders, you can kind of hear it a little bit in the Bosch and Dewalt, is it starts skipping around and starts bouncing up and down. I'm trying to eliminate that by just holding enough pressure so that I'm not guiding the cut, but I'm just stopping the grinder from kicking back up. All right, next up is AEG. That started bouncing around a bit at the end. We've got Milwaukee. Honestly, I'm not actually loving this test. I feel like there's way too many variables that could be influencing it, but we'll keep doing it anyway to get a rough gauge of where these tools lay. And that's the 18-volt tools done. What's surprising is it seems like for most of them, that first cut seems to take the longest. They seem to struggle with that. And as soon as we jump over to the second cut, it cuts through like butter. If anyone knows why that is, I'm actually quite intrigued. Once again though, we've got the wild card. We've got Hikoki's 36 volt. Let's see how this one goes. That didn't seem too bad. That felt pretty good. All right, so I'm sure you Milwaukee fans have a bit of relief in that test, scoring the 6 points, meaning you're no longer last. Dewalt has fallen into last place, and Makita did score 4 points in that test, pushing itself into 3rd place, leaving Bosch in 4th place. So this is the final scoreboard for the video. I did actually film a few more tests, but I didn't include them in the video for various reasons. Some of the tests seemed a little bit unfair in certain ways, so I left those out. And all the tools we tested in this video were tools that were found in all of the combo kits. There are a lot more tools that we can test, but I didn't find it fair testing them in this video if there was one brand that didn't have a certain tool. Obviously they can't score. And for this video, we were having fun with this leaderboard. So this scoreboard does give us a fair indication on how these tools rank from the tests that we have done. Thanks for watching this video, and for now, I think I'm gonna start doing a bit of content with these Hikoki tools. I still can't get over the 36 volt tools being at the same price tag, so we're gonna start using them and abusing them on site, and I wanna see if they can actually hold up when I start knocking them around on site.